Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Cloud Controls Metrics, which is a cybersecurity cloud framework for cloud computing. Today, we are going to be focusing on identity and access management controls and the implementation best practices. I'm Gaurav Gupta. I am the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer for Lord Abbott and Company. I have extensive experience in cybersecurity working for companies like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase. I have implemented Cloud Security Alliance frameworks in my previous roles. And joining me today is Michael. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Gaurav. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are on the globe. My name is Michael Bayere. I'm the Principal Officer for CAS Assurance. CAS Assurance is a CPA firm. We are located in the state of Florida here in the United States. We provide services relating to assurance and compliance with respect to security and the cloud, as well as traditional environment. It is my pleasure to be here this afternoon, this morning, this evening, again, depending on where you are, together with Gaurav to speak a little more about the CCM and focusing specifically on the shared security responsibility model. We do have an agenda. It's not a long one, we assure you. Gaurav, I believe it's a good idea to share our agenda with our audience.
Absolutely, Michael. Today, we are going to focus on five things. In short, we'll first go through the cloud controls metrics overview with Michael. Then I will cover the identity and access management controls. There are 16 controls overall. We'll go through what those are. Then Michael will cover the CSP and CSC shared security responsibility model, that how when you implement controls, the cloud service provider versus cloud service customer responsibilities changes. Moving on, we will share the security implementation best practices from the field, from our practical experiences, and we will conclude with some thoughts in the end. Michael, would you like to walk us through what is cloud controls metrics and what is the importance of it?
Sure. The Cloud Controls Matrix, popularly called CCM, is a research-driven security control framework that is adopted across the globe. It's published by the Cloud Security Alliance through the contributions support of subject matter experts and practitioners in the industries across the globe. It is leveraged by players in the cloud environment, the cloud ecosystem, by customers, by providers, by assurance practitioners. Different stakeholders use the same framework to meet their respective needs. For instance, I, as an assurance practitioner, I use the framework to provide advice to clients on how to design and implement controls in the cloud. I also use the framework to assess the implementation and the maturity of controls in the cloud environment. It is a framework that simplifies the approach to implementation, assessment of controls in the cloud. It's aligned and mapped to global regulations as well as most relevant security frameworks. The framework defines the security responsibilities between the cloud service provider and the cloud service customers in a shared security responsibility model. It also provides the service delivery model applicability of the controls. That is, how those controls apply to the three major service delivery model: the software as a service, the platform as a service, as well as the infrastructure as a service. The CCM, which is currently at version 4, is the backbone for the Cloud Security Alliance STAR program. The STAR program is a program that allows service providers in the cloud to showcase their security practices to their potential as well as their existing customers in a very transparent way. The framework comes with components that are designed to facilitate the ease and effective use of the framework to implement and to mature security controls in the cloud. We have the implementation guidelines as part of the components. We have the consensus assessment initiative questionnaire, which we popularly call CAKE. We also have the auditing guidelines, as well as the shared security responsibility model guidelines. We have the mappings as well as the gap analysis and the metrics to assist in measuring the effectiveness of the controls when they are put into operation. The framework consists of 17 security domains and altogether 197 controls. The identity and access management, popularly called the IAM domain, is one of the 17 domains and is the focus of our discussion. So from this point on, we'll be talking a little more about the IAM domain. Gaurav, what do the controls in the IAM domains look like?
Absolutely, Michael. Uh, we have 16 controls, 16 key controls in the identity and access domain. We won't be going through all the controls in detail. There is a lot of documentation available to make use of. We have an overview slide to help you understand. IAM controls are basically divided into three areas. 5 controls in the identity and access governance that talks about maintaining the inventory of systems and user identities, levels of access those user identities have on those systems, implementing separation of duties based on least privileged access, having policies and procedures, a lot of governance style work. Second category is access lifecycle management. Everything which starts from user requesting access, the supervisor approving access, access being provisioned, access being constantly, periodically reviewed on 6-month basis, 1-year basis based on your policy, and access which is removed when you leave the firm, or it is updated, modified when you change departments. The third section is on identification and authentication, which is such an important area. Based on the security level of your identity, you need to have strong authentication, multiple factor authentication with secure mechanisms, strong authentication credentials, password policies, and protection of passwords themselves. Uh, all these 16 key controls put together, when you implement, you get good governance, you get good access provisioning method framework, and then you have strong authentication and identification in the firm. Uh, Moving on towards the major differences between cloud service provider and cloud service customers, shared responsibilities for these controls, I'll request Michael to give us an overview on what those major differences are.
Certainly, Gaurav. The responsibilities for implementing these 60 controls that we just walked through are shared between the cloud service provider and the cloud service customers. On the part of the service provider, they have the responsibility of providing the capabilities, the functions, and the mechanisms to the customers to implement the controls within their environment. In addition to providing the functionalities, the capabilities, and the features to the customers, the provider has additional responsibility of designing and implementing policies and procedures in their own organization, that is for the cloud, and also define roles and manage those roles and access to resources within their own organization. On the customer side, the customer has the responsibility of understanding and leveraging the features, the capabilities, the functionalities that the service provider has provided on the platform to implement those IAM controls, the system controls with. in addition to leveraging those functionalities and capabilities, the customer also has the responsibility of establishing policies and procedures and define roles and managing those roles among users, as well as their access to resources within their own environment, meaning their data, their applications, their software, their solutions, in terms of their devices within their own environment. It is important that these controls are implemented appropriately on both sides. If there is poor implementation, there are risks that are going to be exposed to, and which of course could lead to bigger problems. What those risks look like, let's leave that to Gareth to walk us through.
Absolutely, Michael. As we have seen in our practical life, implementing these controls, if you don't implement identity and access controls thoroughly, you will be exposed to unauthorized access in your environment. You will not have any visibility or maybe very poor visibility to what entitlements which user has on what system and which data. If you're a regulated company in a regulated market, you will be hard pressed to provide those answers to the regulators that how you are managing the least privileged entitlements all the time. And thirdly, the improperly managed administrative access can create catastrophic damages, because that's where you have the keys of the kingdom with the administrators. And if you don't have proper controls on administrative access, you can have really bad consequences. These three risks, they really get elevated depending on many other factors, primarily four, which is complexity of a cloud environment. Is it hybrid cloud? Is it hybrid multi-cloud? Is it one account, 100 account, 1,000 accounts? Depending on how big you are, these problems, these risks becomes elevated. It is difficult to implement robust IAM security policies and procedures. If you have knowledge gap in the staff that is implementing these controls, designing these controls, architecting these controls, you will have really bad consequences of this risks materializing. And if you have really human resistance in your organization, human element is always the most important element in the implementation of controls. And if there's a resistance to that, you will never be able to achieve the full potential of these controls. So these risks, they get elevated by various complexities that you need to manage along with the implementation of controls. Michael, would you like to tell us, uh, while we may have risks, we may not be into a bad position after all. There are best practices which we, if implement, then we can still make good use of these controls.
Definitely, those risks exist, but we have these best practices that could be employed to mitigate those risks. We have highlighted four best practices here, and the first among them is the obtaining of good understanding of the features, the platform features, the capabilities that the service provider has provided for the customers to leverage. So it's a best practice for the customers to obtain those, to understanding of those features. Usually the providers will provide the knowledge base in terms of manual tutorials on the platform for the customers to understand those features with. So it's best practice for the customer to get those, the understanding of those. It is also a best practice at developing robust policies and procedures, which form the bedrock for the implementation and operation of the controls in the environment, both for the provider as well as for the customer. It's also a best practice to leverage the security features provided by the provider for the customers to leverage those features to implement controls in the environment. Features like role-based access, single sign-on, access review, and other IAM controls. It's not enough just to understand or to have knowledge of those features. It is important to actually put them into use to enhance controls in the environment. And lastly, the education of users is an important piece, and it's a good practice to educate users with respect to the policies and procedures, why they exist, and their importance, and the consequences of violating them, both to the entity as well as to the employees that violate those policies and procedures. Good enough, we have resources that will enhance the employment of these best practices. We have the CCM family, the components of the CCM that we touched on earlier. We can let practitioners, operators, individuals, and the various players in the ecosystem can leverage these resources to close the knowledge gap we talk about, to design policies and procedures that are robust enough, and to, of course, to educate users on the importance of those controls. Of course, they can also use the shared security responsibility model implementation guidelines to understand their own piece of the responsibilities of implementing the controls in the environment. As we come close to the end of our presentation, we hope we have been able to provide a better insight into the IAM domain controls. And we hope you will lay your hands on the resources that are available through the Cloud Security Alliance website to enhance security in your own space. And now over to Gara for our concluding words.
Fantastic, Michael. It was a great conversation. For our listeners, I think we can conclude with some of the highlights in terms of the best practices, controls that we learned. The cloud users should holistically think about the use cases end to end and then come up with a plan to implement the foundations of identity and access, identity lifecycle management, privilege management, administrative access management. You should not be thinking about one or two Z use cases and limit your implementation to that. Think holistically, or workloads, all accounts, structure of the accounts, what kind of data you have, and then design the robust strategy. Second is CCM implementation guidelines are created, as Michael mentioned, for the purpose of educating you, bridging your knowledge gap, empowering you to write policy and procedures, make use of them. And whichever cloud you're using, understand what are the security platforms and features and controls configurations provided by the cloud platform provider, the cloud service provider, and make use of them, which is essentially important in the cloud world because pretty much most of the cloud providers give you a lot of control features. It is just a matter of understanding them and using them the best. With this, we'll conclude today's session. We sincerely hope that this helps you and all the materials that Cloud Controls Matrix Cloud Security Alliance has been producing comes out to your great advantage and you are able to secure your organization. Thank you very much. On behalf of Michael and myself, I thank you once again to be part of this video today.
Thank you.